Tony Blair. Blair is back. He's written a 5,500-word essay on the state of the nation, saying what Keir Starmer's getting wrong, what the other Labour leadership contenders are getting wrong, what the political class as a whole is getting wrong. Tom, what have you made of this? I mean, I've been slightly struck by the fawning praise for a lot of it, considering that some of it is actually quite confronting to the liberal establishment, saying we should do whatever it takes to stop the boats. We should scrap net zero. You do think if one of us had said that, they'd wet their pants or go, start screaming at you. But Tony Blair gets to say it.
No, exactly. What is heretical and terrifying and populist from some quarters is bold and radical and pragmatic, or whatever word you want to apply to it when it's coming from Tony Blair. I mean, there is a certain section, particularly of the media class, who do basically just swoon whenever Tony Blair re-emerges from whatever underground lair in which he strokes his cat maniacally. But there's also he's also coming for a hell of a lot of criticism, even from his sort of nominal allies in the right of the Labour Party, or the Blairite wing, I should say, of the Labour Party, who have even felt the need to push back, given this is basically in complete opposition to what the contemporary Labour Party stands for, which is a combination of welfarism, human rights law, and greenism. That really is their ideology, to the extent that they have one. It sort of unites the various quite fractious wings of the party in many respects. It's a little bit rich hearing Tony Blair lecture us on how broken our politics has become, and particularly because many of the areas, I mean, you take something like environmentalism. I mean, it was New Labour who said a lot of that in Tony Blair's time, but it's more pointedly, I think, in Gordon Brown's time, signing the Climate Change Act into law with cross-party support just before he leaves the political stage. So to turn around now and say all of this was a tremendous mistake is a little bit rich, but nevertheless, the stock clock is right at least twice a day, and I think it's telling that something as simple as, if you want a country to thrive, you need cheap and reliable energy sources, has become something which is met with such conniptions. Tells you how deep this groupthink on that particular question, but many others, goes now.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously it's welcome that Blair is challenging groupthink on certain issues, and hopefully, he will persuade the political class on these things in ways that maybe other people can't. But it does feel as if a lot of what he's saying, or a lot of the brokenness of Britain, does go back to his time, surely. A lot of what he stands for, whether it's technocracy, globalism, these are certainly not the answers to our contemporary problems.
Yeah, that was the nauseating thing about it. The fact that, when he had the chance, when he had a large majority, he didn't practice what he now preaches. In fact, he paved the way for a lot of this. Obviously, he's right about the four main things he talks about. The fact that the Labour Party is deluded and a lot of progressives are deluded. Obviously, the problem of growing welfareism and the growing welfare bill being detached from the tax base. Correct about that. Correct about net zero, and he's correct about the open border and illegal migration. He doesn't mention some very important things, though. He doesn't mention the scale, magnitude of illegal migration, and he doesn't mention housing at all. I mean, I thought it was astonishing. So 5,700 words. I've read it twice. I read it twice to check that he didn't say anything about housing. I didn't think he didn't, then I grokked it, and he doesn't mention the word. And I think it just shows how, I think this is a man from the clouds. I think his head is in the clouds. The things that really animate him, the things that he really is fussed about, is Britain's standing in the world, their place at the table, international standing, and how other people look at us, international bodies and so on. That's really what he's fussed about. But to neglect to even mention the biggest sort of domestic macroeconomic issue, housing, look at the city we're speaking from, half of disposable income young people is just drained away to costs. No wonder there's no growth, because the household budget is so constrained because you haven't invested in housing. So he is right about the four things I mentioned. But he did nothing. He destroyed state sector capacity in house building. It was drained under Thatcher. The stat I love to bring up, which is true, you can check this. Tony Blair built fewer houses in the entire New Labour period than Thatcher did per annum.
Wow.
Per annum. So that's how much it was collapsed. So Blair took the Thatcher economic legacy entirely. He ate the whole thing, free trade, and the rate of deindustrialization was increased under New Labour. So he says at one point in the essay that, really it's military power and strength of the economy, i.e. industry, that determines your power in the world. Well, certainly our industry is largely responsible for the neglect because of power and energy and the fundamentals that we require. So true-ish at times, but just very irritating, to be honest.
But you're definitely right to say that this is about you do of course it's good that politicians think about Britain doing well in the world, and you often feel as if the current crop of politicians don't particularly care about that at all. The willingness of Keir Starmer, say, to give away the Chagos versus Tony Blair was quite upset having to hand over Hong Kong, and he said to his advisors, don't let me give away any more territory, Britain's too small. But for Blair it is about actually hanging out with the other leaders. I think that's why he was so eager to for the UK to join the euro, not because it would be good for the economy, of course it wouldn't be, but because it would increase, because we'd be going to more international meetings, and
he's using metaphor. He wants a structured relationship with the European Union. What he means is high alignment. There's any rejoining or high alignment with rule taking or being a proper nation state. He doesn't want that. And he criticises insularity, mentions Blue Labour a couple of times, doesn't really talk about that very much. But actually, I would argue that if you genuinely want to reindustrialise, or you genuinely want to improve housing and the rest of it, you need a greater level of insularity. You need to have a domestic focus on what happens. And I just see the whole thing, his whole intervention is detached from the real material needs of British people.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's fair to say. I think it was interesting how pointed it was as far as calling out the Labour Party explicitly, giving a series of interviews in which he pretty much said that Ed Miliband was living in fantasy land, criticising the current Labour Prime Minister, former Labour leader in the form of Ed Miliband. And I think it's just quite telling that Tony Blair is often talked up, understandably, as one of the most successful Labour Party politicians and prime ministers, but ultimately he's just a creature of sort of technocratic globalism. I mean, he came very close in the interview on the Today programme this week of admitting he doesn't really care who wins the next election, provided that they take up his ideas. And kind of on the face of it, you think that's fine. Who is so tribal that they would rather their team won, even if they were backing all of the wrong policies. But I think it is telling of the fact that whilst he might have came along as part of a particular intellectual clique at a particular time and took control of the Labour Party, really it was the kind of cementing and the coming to power of an ideology which kind of floats free of domestic democratic politics. It was something that just kind of emerged out of the establishment and it became the establishment very quickly.
Have you been surprised? I shouldn't be answering the questions, yes. But have you been surprised how many people have lapped it up? I have. I mean, quite surprised. Some that should know better.
I've been surprised, yes, how people who should know better than to praise Blair. Also, people who I have seen go completely nuts if you criticise net zero, saying actually we should rethink this. So there's positives and negatives to
I think Blair, from Iraq and the rest of it, is a disgrace. But arguably should be in jail. But the point is, just on the content, people have lapped it up. I'm quite surprised. Yeah. It's quite a superficial essay.
And of course, no Tony Blair essay would be complete without a demand for digital ID. He gets his bugbears in there, and that seems to be the thing that this isn't the first time he's resurfaced in recent years. It usually is to demand digital ID or vaccine passports or something of that nature. What have you made of that aspect of it?
Well, and AI is the through line of the essay as well, which I think is telling because when he brought out his book on leadership, which I did read as a sort of form of, I don't know, masochism or something. But it was, it's interesting because he has this preoccupation with technology, the technologies of the future. And it's this very almost predestined idea he has of politics, which is that there are these emerging technologies, they're going to reshape absolutely everything. And therefore that demands X, Y, Z policy. And as a consequence of that, he's now gotten on to the fact that particularly because of the amount of computing power and energy you need to do AI at scale, that therefore we need to junk all of the net zero things. But it's again, I think it's bound up with people of that particular mindset, which is the idea that history and politics is only really going in one direction, that what people want is sort of irrelevant, political trends are irrelevant, cultural trends are ultimately irrelevant. The march of history is being laid out for us, and what we need to do is find the right policies that kind of fit into it. So I think and also to be frank, it seems like kind of scientific developments that he sort of barely half understands anyway, but it's just that's what he's very attracted to.
He famously didn't have a mobile phone. So it's not as if he's a particularly tech literate person,
Mm.
but he does see technology as as this kind of force that can't be controlled or tamed or put in any particular, maybe in a more humanistic, progressive direction. Same thing with globalization. I mean, that's probably one of his most infamous speeches.
Hmm.
Is talking about, well, we've got to get it's not going to wait around for us. The the world is there for people who don't complain and who just get on board and suck it up.
This is what's happening whether you fuckers like it or not.
Exactly, yeah.
The technology can't really be, the march of technology can't be restrained, but we can restrain the public.
Yeah.
But
Here's
here's the thing,
denial.
though. The thing that, as I say, I find irritating is that he's guilty of the thing he accuses the Labour Party in because the first part of the essay is about comms and the superficial things and, talking about politics rather than policy. And he takes quite a high-minded view on that. But then he falls into exactly the same trap because the essay is just rhetoric. If he was genuinely serious about something like housing or energy, he'd give us a little hint of how you would achieve it. Just tell us how you can do it, mate. Because on housing, you have to know just the three things. Who's going to build them? How are you going to do them? What powers? And unless you can say that, you're not really contributing. And likewise, in energy, it's even worse, actually, because the train that is net zero and in expanding the grid for renewables is so on. You can see it being built. And the instability in the grid is just an ongoing problem. You can't flick your switch and just say, well, let's just stop. I mean, he may want to, but he doesn't show. But again, he doesn't show you how you would do this. So it's more comms.
And also very rich for him to say less more on policy, less on less on politics. This is the government that invented spin.